The bell over the door at Dot's Bakery rang soft, and nobody looked up except the man standing near the register. Elena Marsh set the white box back on the counter before the young clerk could reach for it. "I need to cancel this," she said, keeping her voice even, though the phone in her coat pocket hadn't stopped buzzing for 10 minutes. The clerk asked if something was wrong with the cake. Nothing was wrong with the cake. Elena signed the cancellation slip with a hand that wouldn't hold steady, thanked no one in particular, and left before the door finished swinging shut behind her. Nathan Cole set down his coffee and walked to the counter. "This isn't the story. It looks like 5 minutes in. Stay through the whole thing before deciding who's really losing something here." He didn't know the woman's name. He knew the shape of what he'd just watched. The practiced calm, the way she'd thanked the clerk like the cancellation was routine, the way her hand had trembled anyway. He asked the bakery's owner to put the order back through. Same cake, same name on the ticket, paid in full. He asked her not to mention who'd done it. "She didn't leave an address," Dot said. "I'll get it to you," Nathan told her. And he did, 20 minutes later, copied off the delivery slip the clerk hadn't thrown away yet. Nathan's son, Theo, was waiting for him outside on the bench, swinging his legs, still in his soccer cleats. 8 years old and narrating everything: a dog across the street, a boat trailer backing in wrong, a man dropping his keys down a storm drain. Nathan listened the way he always did, half his attention on the boy, half of it somewhere else. They drove home to the house on Harborview Lane, in the small fishing town of Cannery Cove, tucked along the Washington coast an hour and a half north of Seattle. The house Nathan had been peeling wallpaper out of for the better part of a year. A house that still smelled like sawdust in every room. He'd bought it in cash, no mortgage, the month after they moved up from Seattle, and told the one neighbor who asked that he liked working with his hands. That much, at least, was true. What he didn't say was that a house needing this much work had been the point, something with a clear beginning and a clear end. Unlike most of what he'd walked away from in the city. He made dinner while Theo did homework at the kitchen island. Mac and cheese from a box, because it was Thursday, and Thursday was mac and cheese, a rule Theo had invented and Nathan had never bothered to break. After Theo went to bed, Nathan sat on the back porch with a beer he didn't finish, listening to the straight 2 blocks down, and thought about a woman he'd spoken maybe 4 words to in his life, and how long it had been since something outside his own house had held his attention past dinner. Across town, Elena let herself into a kitchen that looked nothing like a woman in trouble lived there. Soapstone counters, a calendar on the fridge with her son's whole month color-coded. Milo came thundering down the stairs asking what was for dinner. Elena told him spaghetti, same as always, and did not tell him she'd spent the afternoon on the phone with a bank representative who kept using the word hold like it wasn't a decision anyone had made on purpose. The call had come that morning. Marsh Family Distribution Account, temporarily suspended pending internal review. No further detail offered. She'd asked to speak to someone above the representative and been told someone would call her back. No one had. She'd run the numbers twice at her desk before lunch, and both times they came out the same way: enough in the company's operating accounts to keep things steady, nothing in her own name she could touch without trust approval, and a birthday 2 days away that suddenly felt like the one bill she couldn't figure out how to pay. She fed Milo dinner, checked his homework, and sat on the porch steps after he'd gone up, phone in her lap, the account balance app open and useless. At 7:40, a delivery van from Dot's Bakery pulled up outside. The driver set a white box on the porch, said, "Already paid for," and drove off before Elena could ask by whom. She opened it under the porch light. Milo's cake, the one she'd canceled that afternoon with her own signature. No card, no name. Elena stood there a long moment, the box balanced on one hand, the porch light catching the top of it, and for the first time in longer than she could easily remember, she let herself cry without deciding first whether it was allowed. Upstairs, Milo's window was dark. He never knew any of it happened. That was the point. 3 days later, Elena went back to the bakery. She told herself it was to settle the bill, though she knew walking in that it had already been paid. Dot was behind the counter, flour on her forearms, and when Elena asked, carefully, like she wasn't sure she wanted the answer, who had reordered the cake, Dot hesitated only because she wasn't sure it was hers to say. Man comes in most mornings for coffee. Contractor, works on old houses around here. Nathan Cole. She wiped her hands on her apron. Funny thing about him, I heard he used to run some big investment fund down in Seattle. Real money. Now he's out here rebuilding porches for people half his age who couldn't have afforded him 10 years back. She shrugged, like it was gossip and not a door swinging open. People change, I guess. Lost his wife a couple years back, from what I heard. Moved up here after. Keeps to himself, mostly, except for that boy of his. Elena didn't say anything to that. She thanked, took the address of a job site 2 blocks over that Dot offered before she'd even asked. The way small towns hand out information without being asked twice, and walked over with no plan for what she'd say. She found him on a ladder, reframing a window on a house that had clearly been beautiful once and was becoming beautiful again, slowly, board by board. Fresh cedar shingles stacked on the lawn. A radio playing low from the cab of his truck. He came down when he saw her at the base of the ladder, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You're the one who paid for the cake," Elena said. "Not a question." "Dot talks," Nathan said. Not quite a confirmation, not quite a denial. Why? He thought about it longer than she expected. "Because a birthday shouldn't be the thing that gets cancelled," he said finally, "whatever else is going on." Elena didn't ask what he meant. He didn't offer. For a moment neither of them said anything, and the quiet between them wasn't uncomfortable so much as unfamiliar. A truck rattled by on the street behind her. He turned to grab a level off the tailgate, and a business card slid out of the open toolbox and landed face up in the dirt between them. Elena saw it before he did. Cream card stock, soft at the corners, a logo she didn't recognize, and a name printed under it in small type, Northgate Capital, Nathan Cole, founder. Nathan picked it up without comment and slid it back into the box. Elena didn't ask about it, though she wanted to. She thanked him again, said something about Milo loving the cake, and walked back toward her car with a question sitting in her chest the whole way. What does a man who used to run an investment fund want with a hammer and a stack of shingles? Behind her, Nathan watched her go, then looked down at the toolbox like it had betrayed him. He hadn't shown that card to anyone in 2 years. The following Tuesday, Victor Reyes called an emergency session of the Kestrel Maritime Board. 9 seats around the table, Elena at the head only because her father had sat there for 30 years before her. Victor stood instead of sitting, the way he always did when he wanted the room to feel like a courtroom. "I want to be clear, this isn't personal," he said, which was usually how Victor opened the sentences that were the most personal. He laid out numbers. A shipment delay in March, a client account lost to a competitor in Tacoma, a cash position he characterized as concerning, without ever saying concerning to whom. He proposed a formal governance review, and during that review, a suspension of the CEO's operational authority, and separately, a freeze on trust disbursements tied to her equity position, until the picture is clearer. Elena watched 3 board members nod slightly before she'd even finished responding. This had been discussed before this meeting, in rooms she hadn't been invited into. She kept her voice level anyway, the way her father had taught her, argue a point you're losing slower, not louder. Priya Shah, sitting 2 seats down with a legal pad she hadn't written a word on, caught Elena's eye for half a second, something careful and warning in it, then looked back down before anyone else noticed. The board didn't vote that day. They scheduled a formal vote for 3 weeks out, to allow for a complete review, which Elena understood meant 3 weeks for Victor to build a case, and 3 weeks for her to either find one of her own or lose the company her grandfather had started on a single fishing boat lease in 1954. She sat in her car in the marina lot afterward longer than she meant to, her father's original partnership agreement open on the passenger seat beside her. Outside, the docks worked on the way they always did, cranes and forklifts moving crates against a sky that didn't care what had just happened 3 floors above it. Across town, Nathan's phone rang while he was up on scaffolding. A name he hadn't heard in 2 years, Miles Chen, who used to handle disclosure filings for Northgate Capital back when Northgate still existed. "Somebody mentioned your name in connection with the Kestrel Maritime situation," Miles said. "Thought you'd want to know. People are still asking." "I'm not involved in that," Nathan said, and meant it at the time. He climbed back up the ladder and didn't think about it again until that night, lying in bed listening to Theo breathe in the next room, when the name Kestrel Maritime surfaced again out of nowhere and refused to go back under. He got up once, quietly, and stood in the hallway outside Theo's door, listening. Whatever he decided to do about Kestrel Maritime, it would touch this house too. He'd promised himself 2 years ago that nothing from his old life would ever get to do that again. Theo's class put on a spring program the following week, a loose collection of songs and one very earnest recitation about the water cycle. Theo, without any adult coordination at all, had told his teacher his dad was coming. Milo had told his own mother the same, and somehow both boys ended up seated 2 rows apart, their parents converging by accident in the gymnasium doorway. "Small town," Nathan said, by way of greeting, and Elena almost laughed for the first time in 3 weeks. They sat together because there weren't many good seats left, not because either of them planned it. For 40 minutes they watched their sons perform with the mix of pride and second-hand embarrassment every parent recognizes. Milo forgot half his line about evaporation and recovered by making up a better one on the spot. Nathan laughed loud enough that Elena glanced over, and something in the exchange felt easier than either of them had expected coming in. Afterward, in the parking lot, they talked, real conversation, longer than either of them meant it to run. About the house Nathan was restoring, about how long Milo had been asking for a dog, about a farmer's market downtown neither of them had been to in months. Neither touched anything from the last 3 weeks. Reaching for the same gymnasium door at the same moment, their hands nearly touched, and both of them pulled back half a second too fast. Neither mentioned it. Both thought about it the whole drive home. That night, after Milo was asleep, Elena sat at the kitchen table and searched Northgate Capital. Most of what came up was dead links and a handful of business journal archives, the kind that gets stripped down when a company dissolves quietly rather than collapses loudly. One line stayed with her longer than the rest. Founder Nathan Cole has stepped back from day-to-day operations following a personal loss. Sources say with no confirmed timeline for return. She closed the laptop without reading further, some instinct telling her this wasn't information to go digging for from a stranger's obituary-adjacent business coverage. She didn't stop thinking about it either. 2 weeks before the scheduled board vote, Victor hosted what he called a community appreciation event down at the marina, white tents, a band, more reporters than the occasion strictly warranted. He'd invited half the investors on Kestrel Maritime's cap table and made sure every one of them heard him use the phrase, stabilizing leadership, at least once, usually with a hand on someone's shoulder. Elena had to stand up and say something, with less than an hour's notice. She kept it short, thanked the dock workers by name where she could remember them, talked about her grandfather's fishing boat the way she always did when she needed the room to remember whose company this actually was. Sat back down to applause that felt more like relief than enthusiasm, and caught Victor watching her the whole time with an expression that didn't match his hands, which were clapping along with everyone else's. Nathan was 200 yards down the dock, contracted to repair a section of decking that had been rotting since before the event was scheduled, close enough to hear most of it over his own saw. He watched Victor work the crowd and something in the back of his memory turned over slowly, like a name trying to surface from underwater. It came to him at sundown, driving Theo home. Victor Reyes, 9 or 10 years back, a logistics roll-up out of Tacoma that had come across Northgate Capital's desk looking for a growth round. Nathan had passed on it personally after his diligence team flagged inconsistencies in the receivables ledger that never got fully explained. The man who'd pitched that deal had a different title then, a different company name on his card, but the same rehearsed warmth, the same habit of saying, to be clear, right before something wasn't. Nathan pulled over on the shoulder, engine idling, and called Miles back. "That name you mentioned, Victor Reyes. I need you to look into something for me." Quietly. Miles called back 2 days later with a line that told Nathan everything he needed and nothing he wanted. Same forensic pattern as Tacoma. And there's more, the signature work has a signature of its own. Whoever forged that Tacoma ledger did the same thing on at least one other deal I can find. This isn't a one-man job, Nate. Someone builds these for people. A specialist. Victor Reyes didn't learn to do this himself, he hired it. That single detail changed the shape of everything Nathan thought he understood. This wasn't one desperate board member improvising. Somewhere behind Victor was a person who did this for a living, which meant Victor had done it before, successfully enough to do it again, which meant someone else, somewhere, had also lost a company and never found out why. Nathan sat with that a long moment, then called Elena's office and left a message asking her to call him back. Priya Shah had not slept well in 11 days. On the 12th, she stopped fighting it. She met Elena outside the office, in the parking lot of a diner 2 towns over where nobody from Kestrel Maritime would recognize either car, and brought a folder she'd been carrying since the week before the board meeting that started all of this. "I should have shown you this a long time ago," Priya said. "I couldn't. There's a confidentiality clause in my contract, Victor drafted it himself. And I have 2 kids and a mortgage, and I told myself that was a good enough reason to stay quiet." It wasn't. Inside the folder, a copy of the trust amendment Victor had cited as grounds for the disbursement freeze, next to a copy of the same document pulled from the trust's own archived records, filed 4 years earlier, before a single signature on it had been altered. The comparison wasn't subtle once you knew to look. Elena's father's signature on the version Victor presented to the board sat 2 millimeters higher than it did on every other document he'd ever signed. The pen pressure slightly too even, slightly too clean. The kind of consistency that comes from software instead of a hand. "He didn't just freeze your money," Priya said quietly. "He forged the reason he was allowed to." And then, because Elena had gone very still and hadn't asked, Priya kept going, the rest of it coming out in a rush now that the first part was said. "There's something else. Victor is my ex-husband's cousin. I didn't take this job knowing that would matter. I took it because it was a good job, before I even knew who owned it. When Victor started pulling me into this, into keeping the trust files quiet, I told myself family is family, that I was just staying out of something that wasn't mine to fix. I was wrong about that too. He's not doing this to inherit anything of his own. There's a shipping company out of Tacoma, Cascadia Freight, that's been trying to buy Kestrel for 2 years and your father always turned them down. Victor's been talking to them the whole time. If you're removed, if the company looks unstable enough, they buy it at half of what it's worth, and Victor gets a finder's fee he's never once mentioned to this board." Rachel, Elena, sat in the car for a long time after Priya left, the folder open on her lap, and cried in a way she hadn't since her father's funeral. Not from fear this time, but from the particular grief of realizing a dead man had never intended to leave her powerless, and someone had spent months making it look like he had, and that the whole thing had never been about family loyalty or governance concerns at all. It had been a sale, dressed up as a rescue. She was still sitting there when Nathan pulled up to collect Theo from the diner, where both boys had been dropped off for grilled cheese. He caught the tail end of it through the open car window, enough to understand something had broken loose, not enough to know exactly what. "You don't have to tell me," he said. "I know," Elena said. "But I think I might need to tell someone who knows how to read a forged signature. And someone who knows how a company gets sold out from under the people who built it." Nathan was quiet a second too long. "I might know somebody," he said, and something in his voice told Elena that whoever he was thinking of, it wasn't a stranger. "Is it you?" she asked. "The somebody?" He didn't answer right away, and the not answering was its own kind of answer. Over the following days, Miles worked the document the way he used to work fraud cases before he left the industry. Comparing signature pressure curves, tracing metadata buried in the digital scan Priya had pulled before Victor locked the file, cross-referencing dates against a court record from the Tacoma deal 9 years earlier, where the same forensic pattern had first been flagged. He also traced 2 wire transfers from a Cascadia Freight subsidiary into an LLC that shared a registered agent with Victor's home address. The finder's fee Priya had described, sitting in plain sight in a filing nobody at Kestrel had thought to check because nobody had reason to look for it. By the end of the week, Miles had a report Elena's own lawyer said would hold up anywhere she needed it to. The board vote arrived on time, the way scheduled things do whether or not the person who scheduled them is ready. 9 board members took their seats. Victor stood again, the way he always did, and began laying out his case for formalizing the suspension of Elena's authority. He was 3 sentences into it when the conference room door opened and a man in work boots, still faintly dusted with sawdust from a job he hadn't had time to change out of, walked to the front of the room. "My name is Nathan Cole," he said. "Some of you may know me as the contractor working on the Whitmore place a few blocks from here. Fewer of you will know that before that, I founded and ran an investment fund called Northgate Capital, and that 9 years ago we declined to invest in a company Mr. Reyes was raising capital for, because our diligence team found signature and ledger irregularities we couldn't get a satisfactory explanation for. I have a forensic document examiner's report showing the same pattern in the trust amendment Mr. Reyes presented to this board 3 weeks ago. I also have wire records showing a payment from a subsidiary of Cascadia Freight into an account tied to Mr. Reyes personally, dated the week after he first raised the idea of a governance review." The room went very still. Elena sat at the head of the table, watching a man she'd shared a gymnasium bench with become, in real time, someone she hadn't fully known she was standing next to. One of the older board members, who'd served with Elena's father for a decade, asked Nathan directly why he was choosing to get involved in a company he had no formal connection to. "Because I watched a woman cancel her son's birthday cake because someone made sure she couldn't afford it," Nathan said. "And then I watched the same someone stand at a marina party talking about stabilizing leadership, while he was quietly negotiating to sell the company out from under her. I don't have a stake in this company. I have an opinion about people who do that to families." Victor's objections came fast and got smaller with each one. He asked who had let this man into a closed session. Nobody answered him. The room asked for the report instead. When the wire records were passed hand to hand down the table, the silence broke only once, on a low exhale from someone near the far end. When the vote came, it wasn't close. 8-1. The board moved to remove Victor Reyes from his position pending a full independent investigation, and to immediately restore Elena's complete authority and trust disbursements, effective that hour. Victor voted against his own removal. No one else did. He gathered his folder and left without looking at anyone. The week that followed moved fast, the way crises resolve fast once the truth finally has somewhere to land. An independent investigator was retained within 2 days. Victor's access to company systems was suspended by end of day. The deal with Cascadia Freight collapsed the moment its own board learned how it had been engineered. Nobody wanted their name next to a forged signature, whatever the discount. 2 clients who'd quietly begun exploring other shipping partners called Elena personally to say they were staying, now that they understood what had actually been happening behind the numbers Victor had been showing them for months. Elena found Nathan in the hallway outside the conference room, still in his work boots, looking like a man who wasn't entirely sure he'd done the right thing walking in there uninvited. "You could have told me," she said. Not angry, just tired and honest. "I know. Why didn't you?" He leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets. "After my wife died, I didn't want Theo growing up around what money does to people when there's enough of it. I didn't leave because I was ashamed of it. I left because I didn't like who I was becoming close to it." He looked at her. "I wasn't hiding from you specifically. I was just out of practice being that person. Some days I still am. Elena didn't say anything for a moment. Then she reached over and took his hand, held it for 3 or 4 seconds, no longer, and let go. Thank you, she said. For the cake. And for this. You'd have gotten there without me, Nathan said. Maybe, Elena said. But I didn't have to do it alone. That's different, even if the ending's the same. He studied her a moment, the kind of look that wasn't measuring her so much as recalculating something about himself. For what it's worth, he said, I wasn't planning on staying involved past today. I figured I'd hand Miles's report over and go back to the Whitmore place and finish the window I never got back to. Are you going to? Elena asked. Haven't decided yet, Nathan said, and something about the honesty of that landed heavier than a firm answer either way would have. That night, Elena sat on Milo's bed after his lights were supposed to be off already, and when he asked why she seemed happier than she had in weeks, she told him work had gotten a lot less complicated. He accepted that the way 8-year-olds accept most things adults tell them, and went to sleep without knowing anything else had ever been wrong at all. The story made the local paper 2 days later, a short business piece about a governance dispute resolved and a company moving forward under its founding family's leadership. Nathan's name mentioned once, in a single sentence, no photograph attached. He read it standing at his kitchen counter with coffee going cold beside him and felt, for the first time in 2 years, that being seen hadn't cost him anything he wasn't willing to spend. 3 floors up, in an office that was fully hers again, Elena found the white bakery box, empty now, still sitting on the shelf where she'd put it the night Nathan's anonymous cake had shown up on her porch. She hadn't been able to throw it away. Looking at it now, she wasn't sure she wanted to anymore. Kestrel Maritime settled into its new rhythm. The board formalized Priya Shah into a director-level compliance role, a promotion 3 years overdue that nobody objected to once the reasons became public, and once the last of Victor's family connections had quietly stopped meaning anything to anyone. Victor's name came off the letterhead, the parking spot, and eventually, after the investigation closed and a Tacoma prosecutor's office opened its own file on the man who'd built the forged documents for hire, off the company altogether. Theo and Milo kept being friends the way kids keep being friends when nobody makes it complicated. Bikes, a shared obsession with a video game neither set of parents fully understood, afternoons down at the dock watching Nathan work with the specific fascination boys have for power tools they aren't allowed to touch yet. Elena started finding reasons to be at that dock. A coffee run that happened to pass by. A question about property lines that could easily have been a phone call. A stretch of new decking she claimed to want to see finished, though she came back 3 more times after it was. Nathan never asked why she kept showing up, and she never explained it, and both of them seemed to understand that naming it out loud would have ended it somehow, the way naming certain things too early makes them smaller instead of bigger. One evening in early June, she stayed until the light went orange over the strait, sitting on an overturned crate near where Nathan was finishing up for the day. The boys threw a football on the grass behind them, their voices carrying and fading with the wind off the water. You ever think about going back? Elena asked. To what you used to do? Nathan considered it, watching the water. Every now and then. Then I watched Theo catch that ball, and I don't think about it very long. He set his hammer down on the crate beside her. What about you? Ever think about walking away from all of it? Every now and then, Elena said. Then I remember my grandfather leased one boat with money he didn't have, and I figure I owe it more than a bad month. Nathan picked up the hammer again, turning it over once without using it. For what it's worth, I don't regret walking into that boardroom. I thought I would. I don't. Good, Elena said. Because I wasn't going to let you take it back even if you did. That pulled a real laugh out of him, the first one she'd heard from him that wasn't half swallowed or aimed at one of the boys. It stayed with her the whole drive home, longer than she expected a sound like that to last. Driving home that night, Milo asked from the back seat if Nathan and Theo were going to come to his birthday party, the one the company had insisted on redoing properly, now that things had settled. Elena said she'd ask them. Milo said he hoped they'd say yes. Elena, watching the road, realized she was hoping for exactly the same thing, for reasons that had stopped being entirely about her son somewhere along the way. Kestrel Maritime threw Milo's birthday party 3 weeks later than it should have happened, and nobody minded the delay once they saw what the company had put together. A full afternoon at the Marina Pavilion, string lights between the pilings, a table of food that put the original bakery order to shame, half of Milo's class running around the lawn in the June heat. Dot came herself to set up the cake, waving off help until Nathan showed up anyway and started moving tables without being asked, the two of them working side by side the way people do when neither one needs instructions. Priya arrived with her own 2 kids in tow, already laughing with a colleague near the drinks table, no confidentiality clause left to worry about. Elena stood near the water with a paper cup of lemonade, watching Nathan laugh at something Dot said, watching Theo and Milo chase each other barefoot across the grass, and she realized, without being able to name exactly when it had happened, that the distance she used to measure between herself and Nathan Cole had quietly closed sometime over the last 2 months. Board vote by board vote, doc visit by doc visit, without either of them ever announcing it out loud. Priya found her near the water and stood beside her a moment, following her line of sight toward the tables. Staff has a theory about you too, she said. I don't want to hear it, Elena said, though she was smiling when she said it. Didn't think you would. Priya bumped her shoulder lightly and went to go referee an argument between the boys and a bag of water balloons someone shouldn't have brought. When it came time for the cake, both boys insisted on blowing out the candles together, which nobody had planned for and everybody allowed anyway. Nathan came to stand beside Elena to watch, close enough that his shoulder rested against hers, and neither of them moved away from it this time. Good cake, Nathan said, low enough that only she could hear it. You'd know, Elena said. Theo wandered over with frosting on his chin and asked if he and Milo could ride in the golf cart the marina staff used to move equipment. Nathan told him to ask the dockmaster first, and Theo ran off already asking. Across the pavilion, Dot caught Elena's eye and smiled the particular smile of someone who'd watched the whole thing unfold from a bakery counter weeks earlier, and wasn't the least bit surprised by where it had ended up. Neither Nathan nor Elena said anything else. They didn't need to. The first cake he'd ever bought had been for a boy he'd never met, paid for and delivered without his name attached to any part of it. This one he helped carry to the table himself, in daylight, in front of everyone, for a family that had somehow, without either of them deciding it on purpose, become his own.